Hi, welcome back to Monster Transmission. You're at Kurt's Corner. Today we're going to go over how to install a TV cable on a Ford transmission. Typically an AOD transmission operates on a TV cable circuit. It's very similar to a 700 or 204R transmission like on a GM. The AOD has to have a throttle valve cable to adjust the line pressure that also controls the shift points and the kickdown of the transmission. When you buy the transmission from Monster and you get a conversion package, or you can buy just the cable, we get the cables from Locar. This is how the packaging looks when you receive them. The tools that you will need for this operation to install the cable: you'll need a 13mm socket and a ratchet. You also need a couple of 9/16 wrenches, a 1/2-inch wrench, 7/16, 11/32, 5/16, and you also need a very important tool, an Allen key. This will be measured as 3/32 standard Allen key. These are all the tools you'll need to do the installation of the TV cable on the AOD transmission. Alright, this is the cable from Locar and the carburetor bracket. The kit number for this from Locar is the KD-2 AOD HT. Now this is all the components that come in that kit. Over here is the cable kit for the carburetor. So any kind of carburetor that you have, Holley, Rochester, Ederblock, whatever carburetor, you will need this bracket kit. And this is their SRK 4000. We'll go over each kit and the components that come in it. First we're going to start with the cable. If you read the instructions that comes in the kit, it has easy to read instructions, tells you where to use certain tools. It also has pictures and diagrams on how to set it up. But we're going to review everything and exactly how to set it up in your vehicle. First, the cable. You'll notice on either end, this is the end that actually attaches on the transmission. This will mount either on use one of the pan bolts here at this bracket, or it will mount on the side of the case, and we'll go over that in a moment. The other part of the cable, this is the actual part that mounts on the linkage assembly sticking off inside the linkage arm of the transmission. And we'll show you how to install that as well. The other end of the cable, which is very critical, you'll notice that there's several locking nuts and adjustment screws. There's a mounting screw. There's the actual cable end with the carburetor tab. And it also has an adjustable end. And the Allen key that comes in the kit fits this Allen here, and that happens to be a 5/64 Allen key. In case you lose it or you can't find it, it's a 5/64 Allen key. So we'll go over how to install this cable. Next to it is the carburetor bracket. The carburetor bracket contains the bracket mount that mounts on the rear bolt of the carburetor. It comes with the Allen key for adjustment. It comes with a little tab for your return springs. And it comes with 2 return springs and its own instruction on how to set it up. So these are all the parts that we have to start with the cable. We will first start by showing you how to install the cable on the transmission as it's in the vehicle. On Ford transmissions, they have a variety of different linkage arms sticking out of the side of the transmission. On the AOD, they have the TV rod actually goes through the center of your linkage. And the linkage arm can either be down or it can be in the up position. That will determine how you mount the TV cable on the transmission. We're going to start with the linkage arm is in the down position for your particular vehicle, setting up your linkage. So the TV shaft rod cannot be in the same position. It cannot be down. It will interfere with how it's bolted on the transmission. It'll interfere with the linkage. So the answer is the linkage arm must go the opposite direction. It will be mounted up. On the Locar cable, there is a slotted area which fits the flat land, 2 lands on the TV rod. The TV rod is what adjusts the line pressure of the transmission. So you need to install the flat lands over the flat area on the TV cable. Provided in the kit from Locar is the TV nut. You notice it has the long nut, and that's to fit inside the assembly that they send you here. It'll actually fit right over and inside the TV cable itself. Once you secure that down, the size of this nut is 9/16. You only need to hand tighten this nut. Okay? And you should be able to push on this nut, pull on it, and you see the shaft, how it springs back. You want that, ensure that that happens. Because if you over tighten and twist the shaft on the inside of the transmission, it will get stuck between the valve and the valve body itself. So ensure that when you secure the nut, then when you pull on it, it springs back. That's the valve moving inside the transmission. Now, once this part is located and it's secure, the next piece to mount is mounted on the case. There is a boss mount that they refer to in the low-car TV cable instruction. It's this location here, not here. The location referred to is here. The cable will be mounted here. This is the hardware that's supplied from low-car. It's a bolt with 13mm head, half-inch or half-inch. Symmetric thread. It also has a sleeve or collar, lock washer, and it also comes with a lock nut. Now here's how it's installed. You want to put the washer on the bolt. The bolt will go through the top of the bracket that came with the cable. Then you want to install the spacer to shim this bolt up, and then it'll be mounted through the boss casting on the case. And you can see that it's almost relatively even, a little bit of angle to pull the cable. So you have the spacer, the TV cable bracket arm, the washer, and the bolt. Then you install the lock washer on the bottom and then secure it with the lock nut. Again, both sizes, 13mm or half-inch. Once that's secure, again, make sure that this cable springs back. If it springs back, then the valve train is good. Now the end of the cable will be fed up and through the firewall up to the engine compartment. So the cable will flow from here and go up to the carburetor on your engine. Okay, now we're going to demonstrate how to install the TV cable when the linkage arm of the transmission is in the up position. Again, the TV cable has to be opposite of the direction of your linkage so they don't interfere when they operate. So basically line it in the down position up with those two flat lands. You install the castle nut here. Has a 9/16 head. You don't have to over secure it at this point, but what you really want to check is that when the cable is pulled back, that it springs back to the front of the transmission. That's ensuring that inside the transmission that the TV cable is attached and the rod is moving the throttle valve on the valve body. As long as it springs back, you're in good shape. The next thing to understand is this cable was sent to you to fit both directions. This bracket that's on the TV cable has to be changed. In order to change this bracket's direction, instead of facing forward, it's going to face the rear of the transmission. To accomplish this, you must disassemble the cable. The first step in disassembling the cable is, again, releasing this locking barrel with the Allen key that's provided. That will slide off the steel line. Remove the head that locks into the carburetor, and this whole assembly here will slowly slide off the cable. Remove the locking barrel, TV cable head, and the entire assembly will just slide off all together. Those are all the components on this end. Down here on this end, this is a 9/16 on both sides. You can release this nut on the side that has the spring. When you release this nut, unscrew it all the way off of the TV cable. Once that is released, now this cable sheathing will slide completely off the TV cable. So you will remove that completely off the cable. before we mount this back on the cable, what we want to do is mount this bracket onto the second pan bolt back on the transmission. It'll be easier to access that bolt without the cable in the way. So now is the time to install this bracket with it facing towards the rear of the transmission. Remove this bolt. It's a 13mm head. The thread on the pan bolt is an 8mm 1.25 thread. The bolt supplied from Locar, as you see, is the same head and obviously has the same thread to fit the transmission. What you would do is install the washer supplied over the bolt, slide the bolt through the bracket with the washer, install the spacer supplied from Locar on top of the bracket. Now install this assembly in the second pan bolt area of the transmission. You can secure that down. Again, just hand tight. You don't want to over tighten it or you'll crush the pan gasket and it'll be leaking. Now it's secure to the pan. Now we can reinstall the cable. What you need to do first is take the steel leader line, feed it through the hole on the bracket, then feed the threaded portion of the cable over the steel line and feed the TV cable back through the end. Then you're going to feed the cable, the threaded portion, through the bracket and reinstall the nut. Secure the nut down. You can pull the slack out of the TV cable line. Now you can see how the TV cable line is relatively level with the end of the rod. This is the mounting bracket, the return spring for the cable. Ensure it still operates in the transmission where it springs back. And you feed the excess cable up through the firewall of the engine compartment up to the carburetor. Ensuring that you feed it through the firewall side of on the driver's side where the carburetor linkage is. So this will be on the driver's side of the transmission. And now we'll go to showing you how to install the cable before Comet with a 289 engine. He has an Etterblock carburetor, and now we're going to continue the installation of the cable. The first thing you want to do is remove the air cleaner. So the first thing you'll notice that we'll have to remove the factory linkage arm that's holding his gas pedal cable or throttle cable to the carburetor. That will be replaced with a new Locar cable mounted on the rear of the carburetor bolt. So we're going to remove this cable completely off the carburetor. Okay, we've now removed the bracket that was on the engine off the intake, and this is his throttle cable, which was an aftermarket cable. We're now going to remove the rear bolt on the rear of the carburetor to install the bracket. This bolt is typically 1/2 inch bolt, or sometimes it's a stud with a nut, and it can be 1/2 inch or 13mm. This is the bracket from Locar, and what we need to do is install this on the rear bolt that just came off the carburetor. It'll mount this direction with adjustment screw facing the bottom of the carburetor. Basically tighten the bolt down, ensure that it's straight. And there's also an adjustment screw here to make sure that this doesn't twist or pivot forward. The nut size on this shaft is 5/16. So you'll loosen that and adjust this rod in till it touches the carburetor to prevent the twisting action as you accelerate the carburetor. And once that shaft is flush with the carburetor and is pressing against it, then you resecure the nut down. And now this bracket will no longer pivot forward. Now to install the cable onto this bracket, you must loosen this screw. The Allen key comes with the cable, and it is a 5/64 Allen, and it goes inside here. You loosen that Allen so you can slide this apparatus off the cable and mount it onto the bracket. Guide this off. Be sure you don't lose the end of this or any other parts. This tab area will slide right off the cable. You remove the nut on the front of the cable. And now you're going to remove this bracket, which has a screw, an Allen size on the inside, is a 3/64. The nut size is 11/32. Okay, you now mount the bracket, line it up with the top hole here, into the screw hole that's here. We'll line up with the hole on this bracket on this side. Install this nut here. What you can also do is, to help you with the installation, is go ahead and feed the throttle cable back through the top hole, the top two of these two brackets. And now we're going to tighten the nut and the screw. Okay, we've now tightened, secured the bracket that came off the cable onto the low carb bracket that's on the carburetor. This secure, will not move. The gas pedal cable goes through the top hole and can be remounted on the carburetor, but we're first going to demonstrate how to attach the low carb TV cable to the bottom hole of the bracket. Basically feed it through the bottom hole. It has an adjustment nut on the back, and you're going to reinstall the adjustment nut on the front. This is what the nut looks like. Slide it down the cable and back onto the cable support bracket. Okay, you don't need to tighten at this point because there will be adjustments involved. The next component to install, this is an Edelbrock carburetor, as you can see. And to install this TV cable on the Edelbrock carburetor, I would suggest that you get an Edelbrock carburetor adapter kit. We do sell that kit. The Edelbrock carburetor kit that we use from Sonax is an AS505K. These are the components that are in the kit. So the next step in installing the Edelbrock TV cable corrector is, first you need to remove the shaft for the factory throttle cable. You remove this shaft because they supply a new shaft, and this is the position you want to place the shaft in. And we're going to install the Edelbrock linkage nut. This is for the gas pedal. We're also going to, this is the linkage arm that comes in the kit with the correct throw, correct geometry for the TV cable, and a spacer washer. So to install this, what you want to do is install the bolt through the bracket. Make sure that this dowel rod is facing out for the TV cable. You install the spacer washer, because on this bracket there's a space between the surface here where you're mounting to the arm on the bottom. So this will give you the correct positioning. This bottom hole has a flange on it. That flange will line up with the hole that's in the bracket. So you basically line those two holes up. You want to straddle that hole over that flange and install the bolt in the factory position. So that's basically the position. And what you install next is the locking nut that comes with the kit. Mounts on the back. It's 7/16 or 11 millimeter. That's the locking nut. On the front, the shaft is actually a 10 millimeter. So 10 millimeter on the front and 11 millimeter or 7/16 on the securing nut on the rear. And you just hand tighten them down. Once that's secure, you need to install the other secondary bolt. There's a lock washer to prevent it from coming loose. You want to install the Allen size here is 5/32, and the head size of the bolt is 7/16. You can slide that through the lower hole in the carburetor and secure it down. The next thing we want to do is we're going to install the cable onto the lower arm. And the first thing we have to do is reinstall the locking clip of the low-car arm. This is the low-car arm that is mounted on the cable. It has a hole that goes through the center of it. Slide that through the cable, through the arm. And this is the locking barrel. Doesn't matter which direction it goes in. And what you would do is you would pull the slack out of the cable, snap this plastic head of the cable onto the linkage arm of the Edelbrock carburetor kit, and you slide this barrel down to secure it. We'll leave that there, and we're now going to reinstall the throttle cable back onto the carburetor. We now reattach the throttle cable to the top of the carburetor where it was in the factory position. This cable is installed here. Now there's a adjustment procedure for setting up the TV cable. And the way you want to set this cable up is that you pull until you feel the line is straight and you feel some tension on it. Then there's a tool that comes with the low-car kit. The tool that comes in here is called a gauge tool. This is the gauge how to adjust the cable on the transmission. Normally you would hook up a pressure gauge on the TV port of the transmission, and you read that gauge and how to adjust the cable on that. The other way you can adjust the cable is as follows. You would make sure there's little to no slack in the line. Don't put a lot of tension on it. You want to slide when it's not fully accelerated, just with some tension, it's level. Put this gauge between the locking nut and the head of the low-car cable. And then you would secure the cable down with the Allen key that they provide. And now, this is the bulk adjustment of the cable, and this is the fine-tune adjustment to adjust the cable. You can adjust this cable by loosening this nut and allowing this cable to either pull back, which will increase the tension of the TV line pressure, or you can loosen the nut and the rear one and let the cable go forward, and that will reduce and lower the line pressure. The tighter the cable, the more line pressure you'll have at the transmission. That will give you later shift points and a quicker, faster response on kick down or passing gear. So what you do is you secure this, secure the two nuts. Both heads on the nuts are 9/16. You can secure them down, just hand tight. The gauge is installed between the cable end and here, which is secure. Reading the pressure gauge, what you need to do is you need to have the car in park, start it up, put your emergency brake on, put the car in neutral to check the line pressure. And again, the gauge has to be installed in the TV port of the transmission in a location that you can read it. Okay, with the engine just idling at normal operating temperature, then what you would do at idle speed, or just the engine idling, you have the tool, the gauge installed between the head of the bracket, the head of the cable, and the locking barrel. You want to adjust the pressure until it's around 35 psi. Once it's adjusted around 35 psi, you secure this down with the Allen key provided. Then you can remove the tool. The cable will spring back to the transmission. And that is your first set on how to set up the TV cable on the transmission. Then you need to road test the transmission to check the shift points. If the transmission is shifting too late, then that means you need to readjust the cable, but not on the bulk adjustment at the barrel, but back at the bracket at the 2 9/16 nuts. Do not readjust here. This is a bulk adjustment. You'll throw the whole system off. This is your fine-tune adjustment. You would allow this shaft to come forward. That will lower the line pressure, okay, and will allow it to shift earlier. If you need more or need to shift later, then you would loosen these same nuts and have this housing, the shaft, go further back, which will increase the line pressure and give you quicker response for passing gear. So the basic principle of the cable, the tighter the cable, the later and firmer it will shift, and it'll also have a quicker response on kick down or passing gear from overdrive down to third gear. If it's shifting too late, loosen the cable. If it's shifting too early, tighten the cable. And this is where you do your adjustments. Do not reset this barrel. If you do, you have to reinstall the pressure gauge and set it again at 35 psi. So this is the basic adjustments, how to set it up and how you can road test the vehicle. If it's shifting too late, loosen the cable. If it's shifting too early, tighten the cable.